Right now, somewhere on Earth, a person is crying, and as far as we can tell, no other animal in the 4 billion-year history of life has ever done it. Sea lions leak salty fluid from their eyes. Elephants make low rumbles that sound mournful. Your dog whimpers when you leave the house. But none of them produce tears because they feel something, not one. In the entire family tree of life, every fish, every bird, every primate cousin we share 98% of our DNA with, emotional crying shows up exactly once, in us. And the strangest part isn't that we do it, it's that nobody, including Charles Darwin, has ever been able to explain why. In 1872, Darwin published a book called The Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animals. He spent years collecting reports from missionaries, asylum doctors, and zookeepers, trying to fit every human expression into his theory of evolution. He cracked almost all of them. Smiling, frowning, blushing, sneering. He could trace each one back to some useful ancestor behavior. But tears stopped him cold. He called emotional crying purposeless, a leak, an evolutionary accident with no clear function. And for the next 100 years, science basically agreed with him. Now, most people, if you ask them why humans cry, will say something obvious. Tears wash the eyes. Tears flush out stress chemicals. Tears are just what happens when emotions overflow. And all of that sounds reasonable, but it falls apart the moment you look closely. Because the real answer is far stranger than you'd expect, and it has almost nothing to do with your eyes. Start with the basic biology. Humans actually produce 3 completely different kinds of tears. The first is basal tears, the thin film that keeps your eyeball from drying out. Every animal with eyelids has those. The second is reflex tears, the ones that flood out when you chop an onion or get dust in your eye. Lots of animals have those too. But the third kind, emotional tears, the ones triggered by grief or joy or a song in the car, those are ours alone. Chemically, they're not even the same fluid. In the 1980s, a biochemist named William Frey at the St. Paul Ramsey Medical Center in Minnesota collected vials of emotional tears from volunteers watching sad films and compared them to reflex tears from onion cutters. The emotional tears had significantly higher concentrations of protein, of the stress hormone ACTH, of prolactin, and of a natural painkiller called leucine enkephalin. Frey's conclusion was that crying is the body literally flushing stress chemicals out through the eyes. It's a beautiful theory. It's also probably wrong, or at least not the main story. Because if crying were just a detox mechanism, evolution had 1,000 cleaner ways to dump stress hormones, sweat, urine, breath. You don't need to advertise the process by streaking salt water down your face in front of other humans. The fact that tears are visible is the clue everyone missed. The person who picked up that clue is a Dutch psychologist named Ad Vingerhoets at Tilburg University. Vingerhoets has spent more than 30 years doing nothing but studying human crying, and he's probably the world's leading expert on it. His 2013 book, Why Only Humans Weep, is the closest thing we have to a unified theory. And his argument flips Darwin's puzzle on its head. Tears aren't purposeless, Vingerhoets says. They're a signal. Specifically, they're a signal aimed at other humans. Here's the evidence stack. In a series of experiments starting in the late 2000s, Vingerhoets and his colleague Asmir Grachanin showed volunteers pairs of photographs of human faces. The faces were identical, except in one version, the researchers had digitally added tears running down the cheeks, and in the other, they had digitally removed them. When the tears were visible, observers rated those faces as sadder, more in need of help, more trustworthy, and, this is the key one, less aggressive. The tears were doing real social work. They were broadcasting, across a room, in a language older than language. I am not a threat. Come closer. And the timing of when we develop the ability to cry backs this up. Newborn babies scream from the moment they're born, but they don't actually produce emotional tears for the first 1 to 3 months of life. The tears come online almost exactly when babies start making sustained eye contact and reading their caregivers' faces. The plumbing arrives precisely when the social channel opens. Then there's an even weirder finding out of the Weizmann Institute in Israel in 2011. A neuroscientist named Noam Sobel collected emotional tears from women watching sad films, then had men sniff the tears, blind, with no visual cue. The men couldn't consciously smell anything, but their testosterone levels measurably dropped, their physiological arousal dropped, and brain scans showed reduced activity in regions linked to sexual arousal and aggression. The tears were carrying a chemical message, and the message was roughly stand down. So zoom out, put it together. Tears blur your vision, which means while you're crying, you literally cannot fight or flee effectively. You're advertising helplessness. They flatten the reflective surface of your eyes, which other humans read as vulnerability. They release chemicals that lower aggression in whoever is near you, and they show up in babies exactly when they need to bond with adults to survive. This isn't a leak. This is one of the most sophisticated social signals any species has ever evolved. Which leads to the twist. We tend to think of crying as a private thing, a moment of weakness, something to hide, something you do in the bathroom at work. But across cultures and centuries, the data says the opposite. Vingerhoets' international surveys covering more than 30 countries find that the vast majority of crying episodes happen in the presence of at least one other person, or are immediately reported to someone. People cry, on average, between 30 and 64 times a year for women and 6 to 17 times for men, and they almost always do it where another human can see or where another human will hear about it. Even adults who cry alone are usually crying about another person. The behavior is built to be witnessed. We just feel embarrassed by it because somewhere along the line, certain cultures decided that the most human signal in our entire repertoire was something to suppress. And there's one more layer that Vingerhoets points to almost in passing, but it might be the deepest one. Tears probably evolved alongside the long, slow extension of human childhood. We are the only species whose young stay helpless for a full decade, who require constant cooperative care, who need an entire village to raise one child. Somewhere along that path, our ancestors needed a way to call for help that couldn't be faked easily, couldn't be ignored, and worked across language and across strangers. A scream gets attention, but a scream with tears gets compassion. One says danger, the other says I am yours, take care of me. So when Darwin called tears purposeless, he had it exactly backwards. Tears might be one of the most purposeful things our bodies do. They're how a species of fragile, slow-growing, deeply social primates learned to lean on each other without saying a word. They're the reason a stranger on a train will hand you a tissue. They're the reason a parent gets up at 3 a.m. They're a 4 million-year-old evolutionary handshake that says, in the oldest grammar there is, I cannot do this alone. Which means the next time your eyes start to sting in public, in a movie, at a funeral, reading a text from someone you love, and you feel that flash of embarrassment and try to blink it back, remember what's actually happening. Your body is doing the single thing that, as far as we know, no other creature on this planet has ever figured out how to do. It's reaching for someone. Maybe let it